This is a Pauper video. Every other Sunday, my local game store hosts a Pauper tournament. And I have built this deck before you, and I will go there and attempt to win at Friday Night Magic on a Sunday. After mulliganing twice, this is our opponent's opening hand. There's only one forest, but that's all elf decks need. They can play Llanowar Elves into Curing Raider, get a quick lead this Stampede, and hopefully make up for the lost cards. They also have a Timber Wedge Elf, which can then present lethal really quickly if they get a lot of elves off of the lead. This is a good opening hand for them. This hand is great. There's only one land, but we can find another one with Tolerian revealed, and we have 2 Delvers to apply pressure early. The only thing we need is a Brainstorm or a Ponder to make sure we can flip the Delvers. We even have both draw spells and ways to fill up our graveyard and a snake. This is amazing. It's my first game of the tournament, and I lead with a Delver Secret, a 1/1 for 1 mana. They, however, play a Llanowar Elf, which can tap for 1 mana. Now, the Delver does have an ability. At the beginning of upkeep, I can look at the top card of my library. If it's an instant or sorcery, I can reveal it, and Delver becomes a 3/2 flyer. However, this is not an instant or sorcery, and now I have to decide, do I want to draw this card? Because I can shuffle it away by island cycling my Tolerian revealed. And I do need an island, so I might as well do it, because I don't want to draw whatever was on top of my deck. Controlling what you draw is really important in this deck, both to flip Delvers, but also to have the right answers for the right cards at the right time. Delver of Secrets is an incredibly powerful creature. It flips into the Insectile Aberration, a 3/2 flyer, for just 1 mana, and I have 2 in hand. I could end this game before it starts if I flip 2 of them. I put down my second island, and I can attack for 1. If they block with the Llanowar Elf, I'm really happy, because they'll lose a Llanowar Elf, and I do have a second Delver to apply pressure with. So if they had blocked, I think I would be very far ahead. My opponent doesn't play a second land. They tap their Elver for some mana and play a Curian Ranger. Curator is great because it can return the forest to their hand to untap a creature, making both the forest and the Llanowar Elf usable again. Now they can tap their Llanowar Elf again and their forest, and with the extra mana they had from before, they play a Lead the Stampede. It allows them to look at the top 5 card of their library and put all creatures they see into their hand. Hopefully they don't see that many creatures. Oh no, they show 4 creatures. All of those 4 creatures go into their hand. They may have mulliganed down to 5 cards, but they're so far ahead on that card advantage now. It's okay, I have 2 Delver. If I just flip them without manipulating the top, there we go, it's a boomerang. Both of my Delvers now become 3/2 flyers. Now it's a question of the 6 damage being enough to kill my opponent before they can play all those elves and wreak havoc. We attack for 6, putting my opponent down to 13. Now I have a big choice in front of me. Do I slow my opponent down, or do I start milling my own graveyard to get snakes into play? And if I choose to use my boomerang, what should I use it on? Curian Ranger's ability isn't really affected by Summoning Sickness, so returning it to the hand seems like a bad idea. Llanowar Elf, while it is affected by Summoning Sickness, is easily recastable, and the next turn can start making mana again. The Forest, I think, would be the best target. Not only can they only play 1 each turn, but it also becomes a lot more costly to use Curian Ranger, since they can't just keep playing lands. They can only play 1 each turn. So I very smartly choose the Llanowar Elf and not the Forest. Oh well, can't play perfectly all the time. They recast the Llanowar Elf and play an Elvish Mystic, which is basically another Llanowar Elf. So we did slow them down a lot this turn, since they couldn't cast any of the more threatening creatures in their hand. Meanwhile, I'm attacking for 6, putting them down to 7. I'm almost there. Next turn, I'm only 1 off of killing them. Then I cast a Mental Note, milling the top 2 cards of my library and drawing a card. I'm hoping to find a land on the draw so I can still represent counterspell magic, but I don't find it and I have to pass the turn holding up just 1 blue mana. My opponent has some very important decisions to make right now. I'm threatening 6 damage and that's 7 health. This means next turn I will put them down to 1, and if they're at 1, any damage is lethal. So they have to decide whether they want to put on the pressure and try to kill me faster, or if they want to try and play a blocker. If they don't play a blocker, I will swing in for 6, and next turn 1 blocker won't be able to save them. And this all depends on what they think I have in my hand. If I have a bounce spell and they play a blocker, I can just return it to their hand. So how will they respond? Let's see. First they add 2 mana with their Llanowar Elf and their Mystic Elf. They use this mana to play a Priest of Titania, which can tap for 1 green for each elf they control. Then they tap a forest and return that forest to their hand using Curing Ranger, allowing them to untap the Llanowar Elf. They replay the land, they tap 2 mana and play a Timberwatch Elf. This is the way they kill me. They can tap this to give any elf +X, where X is the number of elves they control. Then they also play another Curing Ranger. This is an extremely scary board. Timberwatch Elf can right now tap to give an unblocked elf +6/+6. Then both of the Curing Rangers can untap it, and it can tap once again to give an additional +6/+6 and an additional +6/+6. So any elf that comes through will deal 19 damage. Now you see here as I realize how much trouble I am in. That's not great. Uh-oh. The worst part is they even have the Priest of Titania who can tap for another 6, so they can play a whole lot more elves before they attack if they want to. I play a Cryptic Serpent as an additional blocker. I don't think this will help me a lot, but I do have to attack, because if all I do is block, I will just lose my creatures. Getting in for 3 damage, putting them down to 4, means that if I untap again, and I have both my Delvers, they won't be able to block. Let's ignore that they have a reach creature they can play. Now, it gets a lot worse now. They tap the Priest, adding 6 mana to their mana pool. This is a scary amount of elves. Then they play another Priest of Titania. And then they play a Masked Vandal, adding 2 more elves to their elf pool. Oh no, that's you meet at a tavern. They had enough damage already, but this gives all their creatures +2/+2. They're attacking for 12. This is probably the end. Even after I block, the Timberwatch Elf can give target elf +8/+8, and thanks to Curing Raid, I can do it 3 times. This means I can't avoid taking at least 30 damage here. GG. I realize now if that first Delver had flipped, I could have dealt 2 more damage in that attack, and then an extra Delver on the final attack would have been lethal. This is why Brainstorm is important. For sideboarding, my opponent takes out their Masked Vandals, since I have no artifacts or enchantments they can exile. They also take out the Avenging Hunter, since that's for a longer game, and we're both kind of aggressive decks. They take in Willwisher, that way they can survive any onslaught I have, and my Delvers won't just kill them. They also take in Lysalena, who deals 2 damage to a flying creature whenever an elf enters the battlefield. This is really good against my Delvers as well. I take out all my Spell Piercers since they can't counter creatures, and as soon as they have any amount of mana they can easily pay for the 2 it costs. I take in Dispel because I actually don't have anything great in my sideboard, and I think the Murmuring Mystic might be good to create a lot of blockers in case the game goes long. This time our opponent has a great opening hand. There's 3 elves who make more mana and 2 payoffs. 1 Willwisher to gain a bunch of life and 1 Timberwatch Elf to threaten my life total. It is a bit weak because if I can deal with that 1 Timberwatch Elf, they don't have a lot of threats left. My hand on the other hand is awful. All these snakes are way too expensive and there's no way to make them cheaper. This is a mulligan. This is a better hand. There's a snake and 2 spells that can make it cheaper by milling myself. We have a boomerang as interaction. The only weakness is I do have to send the spell along from the mulligan. Would like some sort of counter magic, but this will have to do. It's game 2 and I want the win here. I start off by playing an island and then passing the turn. My opponent expectedly plays a forest and one of their mana elves. I immediately target myself with a Thought Scour, mill 2 cards and try to make my snake as cheap as possible as fast as possible. I've only put 1 extra spell into the graveyard since I don't have a Brainstorm to control what I put from the top of my deck into the graveyard. I put down another island, and then I pass the turn. I'm holding up 2 blue mana to fake having a counter spell or to use my boomerang. However, my opponent just plays another forest, puts down 2 more elves that make mana, and they have a lot of mana for their next turn. They also attack me for 1, putting me down to 19. Perhaps I should have used my boomerang to slow my opponent down, but I really want to get this Brainstorm off. This way I can put 2 spells on top of my deck, and the mental note in my hand can mill 2 spells exactly, making my Cryptic Serpent only cost 2. So I'm considering what to put on the top. I want most of my spells. I need my boomerang. It's my only piece of interaction, and I have no counter spells. I end up putting 2 Lorien reveals on top of my deck. I would like to be able to cycle for an island, but I could draw an island off the top of my deck, and my boomerang is my only interaction. Here we see them go into the graveyard, and then I draw a card. I put down another island, and here's the Cryptic Serpent. And his good friend, Delver of Secrets. Now my opponent takes their turn, playing another land, giving them 6 mana in total. They proceed to play Timberwatch Elf, the threat from their last game. And then they also play Elvish Branchbender. This is a creature that can tap to animate a forest, making it into a creature. And that forest is as big as you have elves, meaning it would be a 5/5 right now. That, and with the Timberwatch Elf, it's a 10/10 coming my way. It's my turn. I attack with the Cryptic Serpent for 6, putting them down to 14. Neither the Timberwatch Elf or the Branchbender can actually use their abilities right now, so it's a free attack. However, on my turn, I do have to worry about this swing, so I have to hold mana open for my boomerang so I can return the forest they buffed to their hand. Here you see my opponent asking nicely to resolve the Lano Elf. As soon as you see an opponent with open blue mana, you should always ask. They attack with 3 1/1s, and I consider what I should do. I let it in. If they respond by buffing with the Timberwatch Elf, I can always return the elf that got buffed with my boomerang. I play a Thought Scour attacking myself, putting more spells into my graveyard. Actually, I'm just hoping to draw more interactions or more counter spells to get myself out of this situation. They can every turn make a creature that's as big as my snake, and this is a huge problem for me. I do not have a way through for real. But I can't stop. I have to keep attacking and trying to find a way through all these elves. They block by animating a land. This land is a 6/6. They block with the land and with a Lano Elf, and they buff the Lano Elf with a Timberwatch Elf, making it a 7/7. My snake takes the land with it to the death, but I'm gonna run out of snakes before he runs out of elves. So this is quickly going the wrong way. And if I have to be completely honest, I don't think I have a way out of it. I deploy another snake. I still have my boomerang, but I don't see how it saves me from this situation. It seems I will just slowly be grinded out by the elves because all of them are too big and strong for my little snakes. Oh, that's a well-wisher. That's a problem. It can tap and then you gain 1 life for each elf you control. They have a lot of elves. This means even if my snake somehow deals damage, the next turn, my opponent is just gaining that life back. And I had 2 blue open mana and I chose to not counter it. This probably signals to them I don't have a counter spell. In the meantime, they're attacking with their land. It's animated as a 7/7, and I've considered if I want to block it with the Delver. But I need all my power if I'm going to actually fight back here. So I let it in. They could buff for another 7, bringing me down to like 3 life. But they opt for just dealing 7 damage, bringing me down to 9. This also leaves the Timberwatch Elf to be used as a blocker. Well, it doesn't block, but it can make one of the elves into like an 8/8, and then my snake has no attack here. My opponent is playing very well. They know that I don't have any ways to kill all their creatures or take creatures out permanently. All I have are boomerangs and counter spells. So they're in no hurry to kill me, especially because they can gain all their life back. So they just attack with 1 creature a turn right now, slowly whittling me down and winning the game. Because if they started making big plays, my boomerang might do a tempo play. I don't think even that would get me back in the game, but it's the smart way to play. They're playing it slow because they're not afraid of the cards in my deck. I've played another Delver. Last turn I forgot to try and flip my Delver, so they're still both 1/1s in this situation. Not that I think that's gonna be what matters. They play another elf. This time it's looking even worse. The land they animate is a 8/8, meaning if I let it in, they can just use the Timberwatch Elf and then I'm dead. I block with everything and then they do pump it, and I finally get to use my boomerang to save my entire board. And then it's my turn. This time I do remember to trigger my Delvers, and I flip both of them into 3/2 flyers. But not only can they block my Cryptic Snake, even if I connect for 6 damage, they can just gain all that life back with the Well-Wisher. But we do not quit. We send in the snake. It attacks for 6, and it puts our opponent all the way down to 16 because they gained more life with the Well-Wisher than I did damage. They untap, attack, I die. That's the end of the game. There was actually an extra turn in before that happened, but I'll spare you the details. Next up, we're against Tron. I've never played against Tron and Pauper before, so I look forward to see how it's working. Our opponent has 2 of the Tron lands. We'll get back to what that means later. And they have a draw spell and a Prosthetic Prism. I don't know how this deck works, so I don't know if this is a good hand, but our opponent kept it. My hand is exactly what I want. There's a way to put cards into my graveyard. I can control what I put in with Brainstorm. I have a Tolerian Terror I can play on turn 3, and there's a Boomerang to interrupt them. I don't know I'm playing against Tron yet, but bouncing a land against Tron will be really good. And if I need it, I can even find more lands with Lorien revealed. It's a new match, and I want to win. I start with an island and pass the turn. My opponent plays down Ursa's Tower and then passes the turn. Then, in their end step, I want to play a Brainstorm. I draw 3 cards and put 2 cards from my hand back on top of the deck. This allows me to make sure there's 2 spells on top of my deck that I can then mill with a Mental Note or Thought Scour, and that way my snakes will become cheaper a lot faster. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So in my upkeep, I make sure to play the Thought Scour, milling the 2 spells that I put on top of my deck into my graveyard. Okay, then it's my turn, and I untap my land, and I put down another island. Then I play a Boomerang and return their Ursa's Tower to their hand, slowing them down. Hello, it's me, Eva. I'm making this video. I don't know if you caught what just happened, but I sort of made a mistake to my own advantage. I played a spell in their end step, and then in my upkeep, I untap, play a spell, then my brain or me, I kinda get confused, and I untap my land again for some reason, thinking, it's the start of my turn. And my brain also thinks that the card I drew from my Thought Scour was the card for my turn. Is this cheating? Technically, no, not according to the rules. I asked the judge, and what I was told was, if you don't intend to cheat, it's not actually cheating. And I hope you'll believe me. I didn't actually intend to do this. I'm just an idiot, apparently. And I'm lucky I can try to improve and not make mistakes in the future. Don't cheat. It's not worth it. You'll ruin the game. I should be a better player at this point. Thank you. They have to spend their turn replaying their Ursa's Tower, and then they pass the turn to me. I am already at 3 islands now against my opponent's 1 land. Being first and having Boomerang the land, that puts me way ahead. And I can already play a Tolerian Terror, presenting 5/5 on turn 3. My opponent plays the second Ursa's land, and then an expedition map which can find the final Ursa's land. It's my turn. I put down yet another island, and then I get in there with the snake, putting them down to 15. Then we play a main phase Brainstorm. This is the right way to play Brainstorm, by the way. It digs the deepest you can dig. I've learned that from the great Andrea Mengucci. I have no counter spells in hand, or no more snakes, so I'm looking for either of those, either so I can stop my opponent's plan or put a bigger clock on them. I play a Mental Note, putting 2 cards into my graveyard, and I do find another Tolerian Terror, and now we have 10 power on the board. Our opponent must be shivering. No, our opponent plays a Buyuka Bug, exiling my graveyard. This is bad news for me. This means that I can't play any more snakes without having to rebuild my graveyard up. On the other hand, I do have 2 snakes in play, so I don't think it's gonna be a big problem. They used the expedition map as predicted to go find the full set of Ursas. When you have all 3 Ursa lands, the tower, the power plant, and the mine, 2 of them produce 2 colorless mana, and the last one produced 3. So those 3 lands together now produce 7 colorless mana. Next turn, my opponent can cast an 8 mana spell, and I'm scared. I have no counter spells. I attack for 10, however. My opponent is down to 5 life. Unless they have something amazing that can stop 2 snakes, I'm okay here. And I can also fill my graveyard up again. This deck is so resilient. Thought Scour and Mental Note both draw cards and put spells into your graveyard. So even if you exile the graveyard, it's only a minor delay for this deck. I pass the turn. My opponent draws a card, and they now have 8 mana to play spells with. They play a Prophetic Prism. It draws a card when it enters, and for 1 mana and tapping it, you can generate 1 mana of any color. This allows them to use the Urza's mana to play colored spells. That's just what they're going to do. They're going to tap 5 extra mana, turn one of them into a blue, and play a Muldrifter to draw 2. However, even if they have a Muldrifter, I have 10 power and they can only block 5. This is lethal for them. They're looking for something to save them, but they do not find it, and they concede the match. Well, this first game. My opponent has all 3 Tron lands without having to search for any of them, a Prophetic Prism to fix the mana coloring, a Bayuga Bjok to sabotage me, and then the Mystical Teaching can find whatever they need. This seems like a good hand. They did have to mulligan down to 6. Also, I didn't ask them about their sideboard, so I have no idea. Once again, we have a great hand. A Delver on turn 1. It can be guaranteed to flip with the Brainstorm, and we can even guarantee putting spells into our graveyard with the Thought Scour. And then we have a Cryptic Serpent by turn 3. This is such an aggressive hand, and with a 1 mana counter an artifact, we can counter any of the mana fixing artifacts our opponent plays. This is a key. Game 2, and I need the win. I want this match to be mine. My opponent starts off with an Urza's Tower. If they have all 3 lands, they can hit 7 fast. But I have a Delver of Secrets. I might just be able to run away with the game before my opponent can even play the 3rd land. Their turn. They have the 2nd Urza's land, and they play a Prophetic Prism. This allows them to draw a card, and they can filter their mana into colored mana now. This might just be scary for me, but it's okay. I trigger my Delver, but before I resolve the trigger, I play a Brainstorm. With this, I can draw 3 cards and put 2 back on the top. And I can tell you, I'm gonna put an instant sorcery back on the top so fast, my Delver's gonna be running with haste into my opponent. It won't actually have haste, I'm sorry, I'm just being funny. The interesting thing is, as you'll see in a moment, it's a boomerang I've put on top of my deck. And in this game I have to consider, do I want to bounce a land and delay the 7 mana? Or should my boomerang target the artifact to prevent them from having colored mana? I attack for 3. Now after this, I keep 1 blue mana open even though I have a Brainstorm, but that's because I have an Annul and a Steel Sabotage in my hand to stop my opponent from playing artifacts. My opponent draws a card and then assembles Tron without having to search for any of it. This is natural Tron right off the hand. They play a Mystical Teachings. I can't counter this with any of my counter spells, but I would also rather counter whatever it found if it could find a counter spell. And they find an Impulse, which will let them dig even further for more things and stuff. I don't know what this deck is actually trying to do yet. There's no Ugin in Pauper yet. Play another Brainstorm. This Brainstorm will help me get 2 spells on top of my deck that I can then use Thought Scour on in my upkeep and put 2 spells into my graveyard. And then I have to remember to draw a card, not untap my land again, and draw a card for my untap step. No, my Okay, let's go over it. In the beginning of your turn, you have an untap, upkeep, and a draw step. In the untap step, you untap everything. No player gets priority, so no player can play anything. In the upkeep, things trigger, and then you get priority to play spells. In the draw step, you draw, and then each player gets priority. Here I play my Thought Scour before I draw a card, so I'm doing it in my upkeep. I mill 2 cards, and I draw a card from the spell. I go to my draw step, skip my drop, go directly to attack and attack for 3. I am not good at playing things in my beginning phase. Then in my second main phase, I island cycle my Lorien Revealed for an island. I do have a Tolerian Terror I could cast right now, but I would rather keep my 1 mana counter spells for an artifact open. And let's see how that goes for me. My opponent untaps and then plays a Thraben Charm. It can do one of 3 things. It can either shoot for as many creatures as you have, they're not going to do that. You can destroy an enchantment, or they can exile my graveyard. I'm not going to get to play my Tolerian Terror anytime soon, and my counterspell only works for artifacts or enchantments, so this isn't going great. Save me, Delver, you're my only hope. I was extremely worried what my opponent would do with 7 mana, but it wasn't much, and I realized they only have 1 colored mana, so what I want to do here is return the only thing that gives them colored mana to their hand, and then when they recast it, then I can counter it, then stripping them of all colored mana. But first things first, Delver, go reduce that life total. I play another Brainstorm, and I hope this time I'm not trying to do any fancy upkeep shenanigans, so I would really like to actually do that correctly at some point in this match. At least I've learned how to use Brainstorm well by now. So what this Brainstorm does accomplish is it puts 1 more spell into my graveyard, and I didn't have a land, so I found an island I can play for the turn. This way I can keep 3 mana open, 1 for my annul and 1 for my counterspell, meaning I can stop 2 spells this turn. My opponent still has Tron active, which means they have 7 mana. There's the Prophetic Prism. I countered with annul, also denying them a draw from playing it. And their second spell this turn is Energy Refractor, which also turns colorless mana into colored mana. So to keep them off of colored mana, I'll use my counterspell, and that way they're stuck because they only have Tron lands. And I don't think that this deck can do anything without any colored mana. The opponent plays a Buyuka Bug, exiling my graveyard again. I am not going to play those Tolerian Terrors anytime soon. However, we can see my opponent has no spells in hand they can play. They need colored mana. I attack for another 3, putting them down to 8. The pressure is on. If I can get 1 Tolerian Terror into play on my turn, I am threatening. Oh, I just passed the turn with 4 mana open. Okay. That's a questionable play, I think. My opponent plays an Expedition map. They still have another 7 mana after this. I want to slow them down as much as possible, so I use a Spell Pierce just to make them burn another 2 mana. However, they will pay the 2 mana, and then I'll be able to find something that can give them colored mana this turn. So the question is whether they can win off of that. Expedition map can spend 2 mana, tap it and sacrifice it to find any land in your deck and put it into your hand. This is usually used to assemble Tron or to find more Tron lands to really accelerate your mana. But here, they just have to find a basic land so they can finally have some colored mana. They're going to find an island with it. That island will allow them to play an Impulse, the Impulse they found before, and search their deck for something they need right now to get back into this game. Impulse lets them look at the top 4 cards of their library, put 1 into the hand and the rest of the bottom. But the funny thing is they're playing an old version that says to shuffle after you've done it, making it irrelevant to put them on the bottom. The real card, however, has been errated, and you don't have to shuffle after, which I find very funny. So they won't be able to actually cast anything threatening this turn, but at the same time, because my graveyard has been exiled twice, I'm applying as little pressure as I could. I have 2 Tolerian Terrors in my hand, just wanting to get out there, but I need some way to put cards into my graveyard, and they need something that actually wins the game even though they have 9 mana. Now, my opponent has to Island Cycle the Lorien Revealed because it costs 2 blue mana to cast it, and since I've taken away all their mana filtering, they really need islands to get going right now. This is effectively denying them 3 draws, which is really important at this point of the game. My opponent is more affected by being held back on colored mana by any pressure I have actually put down. They've stopped my game plan, and I've stopped theirs. I really hope this Delver can go the way. They find the island, pass the turn. I untap. I attack. They go down to 5? Which means my Delver has to hit them 2 more times. And I only have big snakes in my hand. I can't actually cast anything because my graveyard has been exiled. It's their turn. They have 9 mana in total this turn. And they even have 2 blue colored mana. The problem is, they can't cast a crop rotation in their hand that would really spiral them out of control right now. But I will not lie, I'm terrified. This is a lot of mana coming my way right now. My opponent starts by casting this wall, When it enters, they may return an instant or a sorcery from their graveyard to their hand. They return mystical teachings, which can allow them to find another instant. It does have flashback, so I find this a little odd, but maybe they just need to save mana and try and win this turn. I don't know what their win condition is, but seeing this, I assume they have a ghostly flicker and need that to infinitely untap their lands and blink their wall, but we'll get into that in a moment. They cast the mystical teachings. My hope is they don't have enough colored mana to do whatever combo it is they're looking for, and that my plan of sabotaging their mana will pay off in that sense. Because otherwise I could have had the counterspell to stop them dead in their tracks right now. Even though that card does have flashback, so they could try again next turn. And they do find the ghostly flicker. I might be in a world of trouble now. I'm not sure how their combo works at this point, and thinking about it now, I don't think it actually is an infinite combo. Now that they have all the pieces, it becomes my turn. I do what I do best, and I attack for 3. The Insectile Aberration does have flying, so even though they have a blocker now, it doesn't matter, because they can't block a flyer, and they go all the way down to 2. I was lucky enough to draw Thought Scour and mill 2 spells off of it. And not only that, I was lucky enough to draw another Thought Scour, which also hit 2 spells, making my big snakes in my hand cost 1 mana. And then I get to deploy 2 Tolerian Terrors. It's a bit late in the game since they're down to 2 life, but it's still worth doing just in case that they actually deploy blockers in some sense. I do know they play Muldrifter, and that could block my Delver of Secrets right now. It's their turn, they untap, they have all the mana in the world, and they have their ghostly flicker. I'm tapped out, there's no counter spells. It's now. My opponent has a crop rotation, a Muldrifter, a focus the mind, and a ghostly flicker. In my opinion, what they should do here is either play the Muldrifter, the focus the mind, to look for more cards. This does not seem like they have any sort of combo in hand. They play the ghostly flicker, which removes the mnemonic wall from the game and puts it back into play. It also targets one of the lands, giving them 2 mana back. Then the mnemonic wall returns the ghostly flicker to their hand, but this is not an infinite combo, because it either untaps 2 colorless mana or 1 blue mana, and it just returns the ghostly flicker. This just sets them back 1 mana. If they had a way to filter their mana, they could use this much more efficiently to generate a lot of colored mana right now. But this doesn't work to win them the game. My opponent then looks for what they can actually do and find out that all they can do in this position is to play a draw spell and hope to get something. However, all they get is a tapped green land and a Weather the Storm. If they could play Weather the Storm, they could gain a whole bunch of life, but since we've taken away all their green mana and the land they got is tapped, they can't play Weather the Storm, and all they can do now is block with the wall and take 8 damage, and they're 2 life. It takes a while, and my opponent realizes this and concedes the game. And we win the second match. We are 1 for 1. For the third match, we're up against the blue-black control deck, which uses Sneaky Snacker and a bunch of other fairies. Sneaky Snacker is really interesting. It costs 2 mana, and it's a 2/1 fairy with flying. It also has a really interesting ability that when you draw your 3rd card for a turn, it returns from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. You may have noticed that I'm not commenting on the gameplay itself. That's because eventually my camera just started being blurry, so I'm just gonna summarize the matches quick. In the first match, we were up against 1 fairy at a time, and they got lifelink, and we just had to trade more health with them. The interesting thing about the matchup was it was very counter heavy and very draw heavy. It was just about who could dig the furthest into the deck to get the most counter spells to stop the other's game plan. If I can use my counter spells to counter their draw spells, then they won't get the Sneaky Snacker back, and I'll also stop their best way of making card advantage, which is really good. And that's what happened in the first game. I counter all the draw spells, I play 2 snakes, and they eventually can't keep up with just some small fairies, even if they have lifelink. For the second match, let's talk about how sideboarding really works. My opponent sideboards in Thorn of the Black Rose as one of their cards. At least I think it's the sideboard, I didn't confirm it with them. Which gives them the Monarch, which lets them draw 1 card extra each turn, and I can steal the monarch by dealing combat damage to them with a creature. Them drawing an extra card each turn probably will just win them the game, because this is a sort of matchup where whoever has the most cards, has the most counterspell, wins the game. And it also makes it a lot easier for them to bring those sneaky snaggers back. They also bring in something called Nihil Spellbomb, which can exile my graveyard, which can make my snakes unplayable. These are both great sideboard cards against me. One just wins the grindy matchup of card advantage, and the other one stops my game plan. Me, I sideboard in Relic of Progenitors. It's also a way to exile their graveyard. The problem is it also exiles my own graveyard, so it's actually not very useful. And I've removed it from my sideboard since exiling my graveyard stops my own game plan. But I really wanted to stop the sneaky snagger. I also brought in Steel Sabotage, which counters an artifact spell. Now, they don't play any artifact spells in the whole deck, except the Nihil Spellbomb they sideboarded in. And I don't know why I put in Steel Sabotage. This is a blunder, but it does actually help me win the game. What's really interesting about this matchup is I have 8 snakes in my deck, and they have Gurmag Angler, Thorn of the Black Rose with Death Touch, and a bunch of cast downs which can all kill them. So they know if they can kill 8 of my snakes, I'm out. I don't have anything else to threaten them with. So in a long grinding matchup, they can win by just going for a long game, because they can always bring back the sneaky snaggers by drawing cards. So everything in this game went right for me. First off, they only drew a single removal spell. I got to trade one snake with a Gurmag Angler, but otherwise they had no way to get rid of my creatures, and none of their counterspells were timed right enough for my snakes, while my counterspells were on target. They hit the Thorn of the Black Rose, they hit the Nihil Spellbomb with a Steel Sabotage, which was the winning gameplay for me. And I also somehow managed to use the Relic of Progenitors to get rid of the sneaky snaggers without hurting my own ability to play my snakes. So all that combined, and then in the end, they did get the Monarch, but I managed to use a Boomerang to remove a flying blocker, hit them, steal the Monarch, and then I had all the card advantage, and I had stopped their game plan simply by using a very odd sideboard in a very lucky way, and them not having any of the removal spells in the top 30 to 40 cards of their deck. Listen, sometimes you just take the wins that you're given. Luck is a skill sometimes in Magic. My opponent's playing Infect, which means his creatures has Infect and they deal damage in form of poison counters or -1/-1 counters. If you get 10 poison counters, you lose the game. I've played against my opponent before, and I know they're playing Infect, so I know this has to be fast and I need interaction. However, their hand is kind of slow. They have 2 lands that come into play tapped, and all their creatures cost 2. So this isn't the most explosive Infect hand. But if I'm not careful, that Snakeskin Veil could ruin my day on a Boomerang. My hand is okay. I have a Thought Scour to mill myself and a payoff in Tolerian Terror. However, I do need the Thought Scour to blindly hit spells, and I have a few too many islands. But I'm going to keep this hand and hope it's good enough. I get to go first, which is really good against a deck as fast as Infect. I play an island and pass the turn, so I can play my Thought Scour and hopefully get a cheap snake fast. They play their tap land and pass the turn, and I play my Thought Scour, and I blindly mill 2 spells into my graveyard. This is great. If I island Cyclorian Revealed, I'll already have 4 spells in my graveyard. I play an island and keep 2 mana open because I drew a counter spell. It's really important to deal with my opponent's creatures. If they don't have any creatures, they don't have any targets for their pump spells. They play another land, try to play a Glistener Elf, and I play a counter spell. This also counts as having 4 spells in the graveyard now, which means I can play my Tolerian Terror already on turn 3, even though it costs me all my mana. My opponent only has to deal 10 damage, but Tolerian Terror is a 5/5, which means I might be able to kill them before they kill me in this situation. They fetch for a forest with the Escape Tunnel. The Escape Tunnel is interesting because it can make a creature with 2 or less power unblockable for a turn, which means they could attack with a 1/1 with Infect, make it unblockable, and after it's become unblockable, use their pump spells to make it into a 10/10 and kill me. So I'm very glad to see it used as just a tap land, because instead of speeding them up, it's slowing them down. Which means everything in this matchup right now. My opponent plays a Plague Stinger, which is a 1-1 with flying and infect. So that could be a problem. I have no way of stopping it since I have no boomerangs in hand. So now the race is on. Who can kill the other person first? I play a Ponder, which hopefully helps me find some sort of threat to deal with this. If I just have the one Tolerian Terror, I can only swing in for 5. It'll take 4 turns to kill my opponent. My opponent can't ever really block. They can't afford to lose their creatures. And on the defense, their creatures are tiny. So let's see if I can deal 20 before they deal 10. I found nothing good in the top 3 cards of my deck, so I'm shuffling with my Ponder and hoping I draw something off the top that's really good at this point. And I play the Cryptic Serpent for another 6 power. This is going to be very relevant that that's not a Tolerian Terror. It is, however, terrifying to against Infect tap out and have no way to deal with their creature. My opponent has a 1-1 Infect, and if they have enough buff spells right now, there's nothing I can do. I will just die. So we were hoping on some more blind luck here. My opponent has to figure out what the fastest way to deal 10 Infect damage is. Is it deploying more creatures, or do they have enough pump spells to just kill me over 1 or 2 turns? My opponent plays another Infect creature, and I'm very happy that I'm not dead right now at least. And then they attack me for 1 Infect. The new creature isn't as bad because it doesn't fly and it's smaller than all of my snakes. So if I want to, I can always leave a blocker back, and they'll have to use a pump spell to even trade with my creatures. It's my turn. I have 1 poison counter, and with the 2 power they have, all they need is a buff spell for 7 and I'm dead. I attack with everything, dealing 11 damage, putting them down to 4. I drew a boomerang. You can see it here in my hand. It's the whiteboarded one, even though it's very hard to see. And because I have that boomerang, I feel comfortable enough attacking, and I can use the boomerang to return one of the infect creatures after it's been buffed. My opponent's once again counting. They've dealt 1 poison, they have 2 more on the board, so they need to have 7 power of buff spells in their hand. Now, this seems like it should be easy math, but when you're in it, it can be quite difficult to count to 10. I'm not joking. My opponent attacks. This kind of terrifies me because it signals that they do have the damage. They cast Rouse, which gives +2/+0 to a creature, and you can play it without paying its mana cost if you control a swamp and by paying 2 life. It's still not enough infect to kill me, so I don't want to use my boomerang yet. They could have a Snakeskin Veil. If I play boomerang, they play Snakeskin Veil, my boomerang will fail to return the creature, and I could lose the game that way. However, my opponent once again has to count, and they didn't miscount their damage. What they miscounted is they're down to 2 life, so the second Rouse in their hand, they can't play without paying its mana cost. Well, they could, but they would lose the 2 life they have and die before killing me. My opponent realizes this and then concedes the first game, since they have no way of stopping my 11 power from, killing them. If my Cryptic Snake had been a Tolerian Terror, they would have had 3 life left and could have played the second Rouse for lethal damage. But I guess at that point, I would still have a boomerang to try and save myself with. This is a great starting hand. We have the lands we need, we have ways to mill into a graveyard, we have ways to check what's on the top of our deck to mill it in. We don't have any way to get rid of what's on the top. We don't have any spells to put on the top. On the other hand, we have all the big snakes we could ever need, which means we can kill our opponent fast if we need to, and we can get huge blockers down if they have an explosive start. So let's keep this and see how it goes. It's match 2. My opponent had to mulligan to 5. Sadly, I can't show you the hand because they didn't show it to me. But they lead with a swamp. I'm very happy to not see a Glistener Elf. When Infect goes first and they have the right hand, they're terrifying. I play an island and pass the turn back. My opponent passes the turn. They do not have a second land. They kept a 1-lander, which I understand going further down in cards would be terrifying. And if there is a deck that can kill you with very little mana, it's probably Infect. But the fact that they have no green mana is probably going to be a big problem here. Meanwhile, I have a Brainstorm to make my hand even better. Luckily this time, I don't have any upkeep draw step shenanigans, so I can just draw my card and not fear for my inability to play correctly. I play another island. Now, my opponent doesn't have any creatures in play yet, so I'm not that afraid of keeping interaction open, but it is good to do. They find the second swamp and deploy an infect creature. I don't actually have a counterspell here, but they don't have any green mana, so it's unlikely they can boost this very much. So I want to mill myself, playing 1 mental note to mill 2 cards, which gives me 1 extra spell. That's 3 spells in my graveyard, and since I also have a Thought Scour, that's at least 4 spells in my graveyard, and I get the 5th, making my snakes cost 2 mana. Now, since I've played a lot of Tolerian Tower, I'm very good at it. So I count the amount of spells in my graveyard, tap 2 mana, and play 2 snakes. Here they are, both of my Tolerian Terror. My opponent says okay, and then looks at the snakes, counts my lands, and reminds me I actually need 6 spells in my graveyard to make it better. So we play another mental note, put another 2 cards into your graveyard, and then we can play both the snakes. I don't know why I thought it was only 5, it's just that it's a 5/5. It feels like it should be 5, for the symmetry, but that would be kind of broken. I'm glad it is 6. I passed the turn. My opponent is still stuck with only 2 swamps. I doubt they can kill me with just one, so that's why I didn't keep anything open. I don't mind them attacking me, because what is the chance they can boost this for 9 with no green mana? My opponent's big problem here is they missed the land drop, and they only have the 1 creature deployed right now, and I'm striking for 10 next turn, so I am just outpacing them as long as they don't have green mana. But they can't possibly stay on the defensive, so they attack for 1, giving me 1 poison counter. If they stayed defensively, they would have to block with the creature and then trade with a snake with some pump spell, but that would cost them so many resources, the chance of giving me 10 poison counters would be extremely low afterward. They cast Mutagenic Growth, giving it +2/+2 by paying 2 life, and then cast Funeral Triumph, giving it +1/-2 for a total of 5 poison counters. This is a lot, especially because I can only swing them down to 10 now. So they're ahead on the race. If they can pull off another 5 poison counters, I will need a piece of interaction to win this game. I play another Thought Scour, looking for some way to interact with my opponent, since I have enough cards in my graveyard already. I'm considering whether I should mill myself or my opponent. Milling myself wouldn't really help me anymore at this point, but milling my opponent could be funny, because what if I milled a forest? So we mill a Glistener Elf and a green source, and then we draw a card. Swing in for 10, putting our opponent down to 10. My opponent wouldn't like being at 10 because that means I have lethal, so they play Whisper of the Dross, giving a creature -1/-1, and they could proliferate the poison counter. However, Tolerian Terror has Ward, so they would need to pay 2 mana for it. My opponent realizes this and takes the play back. Usually I would be mean and say no, that's too late, but it's just a casual Friday night Magic game, and I am pretty far ahead since they've been manic screwed, so, it's fine. And I have been making a lot of mistakes myself now watching the footage back, so it's hard being tough on others. My opponent concedes, knowing they can't actually deal another 5 poison counter now, and I have a swing for lethal, since they couldn't give a creature -1/-1. If they could have survived at 1, bought another turn, and tried to kill me over 2 turns with the poison counters. GG. It's been really interesting watching this footage back. When you play and you make mistakes, it's really hard to realize it in the moment if your opponent doesn't point it out to you, as was done a couple of times. But I'm glad I watched this back and I can see my mistakes as I played, and I have to practice playing my upkeep. I do play with my deck and practice playing it, especially because Brainstorm is so hard to use correctly. I've been sitting with my deck, just drawing hands, trying as fast as I can to get those snakes into play. But what I need to think is take it a bit slower, realize my untap upkeep draw step, and play correctly in that. I played 3rd in this. tournament. There were two other people who went 3-1, but their opponents had better, like, win rates. So the elves who beat me, they were the reason. They're the reason I'm third and not first. But that's a really good, performance. I think, especially if we look at the matches. I made a lot of mistakes, so there's a lot of room to improve. I can probably keep hitting the first place, which is improve a little bit. But I am gonna start playing a much, much worse deck, I think.